When I was younger, I used to get 10 Bangladeshi taka every week from my father as pocket money. That was the happiest day of the week for me. Most of the time, I spent it on a bag of crisps or a packet of juice. These days, whenever my father sends me money, he sends it to my mobile e-wallet, and he attaches a cute message with it every time. The times have changed, but the emotions are still the same. No matter where in the world, P2P payments are not just about transferring money. It can translate to sending a message, sending love, and sharing happiness. It is not just a transaction, but a bridge that stands on the sense of belonging to a community. This sense of belonging is what makes PayMe different. It's more than just another e-wallet. Good morning, everyone. We are from the University of Dhaka, Bangladesh, and we will be presenting our case today on PayMe, Hong Kong's e-wallet. PayMe is the e-wallet of HSBC, one of the world's largest banking and financial organizations. It has already gained 2.6 billion users in a city of 7.4 million. Although they initially focused on P2P users only, they have now pivoted to P2M and merchants. They have onboarded 25,000 merchants across 869 brands in Hong Kong, and PayMe's e-wallet holds 2 billion Hong Kong dollars. Payment's main three competitors are Octopus Wallet, WeChat Pay, and Alipay Hong Kong. Octopus Wallet is most popular for use in public transports. Its parent company's Octopus cards are widely accepted by merchants, but the wallet focuses more on the top of this Octopus card. WeChat Pay, on the other hand, is the third most popular e-wallet. It is accepted by 263 brands, and PayMe has more than tripled their numbers under their belt. Similar to PayMe, WeChat Pay is considered a social app. Alipay Hong Kong is the most popular e-wallet in Hong Kong with over 100,000 merchants. They focus more on e-commerce and online payments. Before we get into the nitty-gritty parts of PayMe, we felt that it was only appropriate if we took a better look at the culture of the people of Hong Kong in order to familiarize ourselves with this wonderful land. The elders here are collectivistic, whereas the youngers are more individualistic. And the people of Hong Kong have a very strong sense of civic values, which has led them to form tight-knit communities who look out for each other. And festivals like the Chinese Spring Festival, Dragon Boat Festival, and others are a big part of the tradition. Coming to the demographics, the primary target group of PayMe's current campaigns are the 18 to 14-year-olds. These people are the early adopters of the product and have driven the exponential growth of PayMe's user base. PayMe currently does not target the older generations, although these people are the main customers of HSBC, their parent company. Going forward, we think that it is important for PayMe to identify these people as a secondary target group. This is because 52.5% of Hong Kong's population are over 45, and discarding them from the larger future plan may lead to heavy opportunity costs in the long run. The merchants are also another customer group of PayMe. Initially, merchants couldn't see PayMe as a necessity because they were reliant on cash, credit cards, and Octopus cards, which have been around for a very long time. But PayMe has successfully onboarded 25,000 of them across food and beverage, supermarket, e-commerce services, and retail sectors. We tried to visualize what the day-to-day journey of a Gen Z would look like and where they might need e-payment wallets. The boxes in red here are the touch points where they generally use or need to use e-wallet payments. Moreover, we have identified some underlying factors that they consider while making financial decisions, which include the urge to reach financial independence, make plans for trips or purchases, or when a special event like the Chinese Spring Festival is coming up. We did the same for people who are aged above 40, and the boxes marked in blue show the touch points where they have the need to use e-wallets. The underlying factors that influence the financial behavior include being collectivistic, wanting to make their families happy, and seeking a seamless experience and celebrating events special to them. Now, these are PayMe's P2P users, and we can see that they have a clear approach here. However, firstly, on the P2M end, there is a lack of a clear merchant onboarding strategy. PayMe derives money solely from commission by merchants, and a clearly defined plan is very imperative. Secondly, PayMe is unsure of what to do next in order to scale the product. They need a clear strategy to sustain their advantage in the market, especially since there's so many competitors. Finally, their monetization model is not robust yet. So the overarching issue here is the lack of an end-to-end growth strategy for PayMe that considers value for merchants, customer communities, and the company itself. My team at Shadab will be carrying forward.
Before we move to our plan of action, we must assess all the available alternatives we had. The first alternative was to evaluate if PayMe should become a social ecosystem as a whole. While attempting to be a social ecosystem could constrain us to focus on only specific events of the year, it has an ability to increase customer retention through social factors. This further helps enforce the feeling of community and focuses on cultural ties. Assessing the comparative, we plan on implementing a social ecosystem. This would help us connect with people across different age brackets, as Hong Kong already harbors a communal feeling to begin with. The next decision factor we evaluated was whether to introduce investment products through PayMe or not. From the get go, the two noticeable setbacks in this particular alternative are the high capacity building requirement and the existing of a highly competitive segment as a whole. But despite that, it would help PayMe capitalize on its existing reputation. This further allows us to explore an entirely new category with the potential of attracting a new user base due to this addition. Therefore, we have decided to provide investment products. While the competitive nature of the market might seem daunting, we have made enough additions to differentiate, something you will observe in the action plan. The next point we must decide on is if we should solely focus on Gen Z or not. While the Gen Z is an already inclined user base of PayMe and onboarding them could potentially mean the company foolproofing its future, it has a few drawbacks, particularly like solely focusing on the Gen Z, right? Most of the benefits assumed only consider positive scenarios, but a multitude of things could happen, such as these people not retaining our services after they grow up. On top of that, a sole focus on Gen Z would mean that PayMe is moving away from targeting other age segments as a whole. Therefore, solely targeting Gen Z is not an option we considered. This is largely because the maximum percentage of the population is the older generation. To succeed in this particular segment, a widespread acceptability of the service needs to be established, something which is only possible when you get all the age brackets in. The next alternative that requires evaluation is whether the essential digital services should be extended or not. The primary principle of this is to ensure widespread availability of these services. On top of this, it requires a massive app integration. While successful application of this could potentially allow higher loyalty of use towards PayMe, but this was not an alternative we moved forward with, especially because some of our competitors were first mover in terms of these services, and it is hard to take away market shares in a service that has less room for value addition. The last decision point was in regards to whether PayMe should expand globally or not. Global expansion could potentially allow PayMe to capitalize the global connections of HSBC. And the fact that PayMe is technologically advanced, it would allow for great room to scale up the business. But despite all this, the global market has existing stable major players depending on the region, which means entering these markets wouldn't be feasible as these markets might be more mature than we think. On top of that, it is capital intensive, and entering new foreign markets would mean adjusting to new demographic and cultural barriers. Therefore, taking all of this into account, we have for now decided not to extend operations globally. Now, if you thought this all of this was a bit verbose, I've brought all of this down into a summary. It is observable from the brief overview that the alternatives we have selected are building a social ecosystem and providing investment products as an additional service, something we will extend on when we are explaining our action plan. Before we get into what the big idea for our plan is, we must look at what it is based on. We took into consideration the avenues we would want to expand to, along with increasing inclusivity of the service. In principle, we want to attract people in the short term and scale up by providing them with the value added services. Based on these pillars, the big idea of our plan is Hook by community, drive by services. Given how we know the people in Hong Kong always harbor a sense of community, we want to build an inclusive PayMe community. And upon building this community, we want to expand and meet customer demands through our existing services and other proposed services. My teammate Afnan Farooq will now take it on from here. Thank you.
Now, before we go into the details of the action plan, it's very necessary to understand the context. Customers in general have been habituated with fintech products through online banking, mobile banking, and P2P services, right? These services have already become commoditized. The second layer here are the P2Ms and the e-commerce payments. In these categories, there are already big players dominating like Alipay and WeChat. But the next scope of banking services and other augmented financial services, this is where we have the advantage of our parent company, and people are used to paying for such services as well. Our objective in this whole process is to both grow customers and merchants and bring monetization. However, we have to keep in mind that our solutions have to address the problems and gain market share as soon as possible. Otherwise, competitors can come in very fast. The max time limit that we can stretch our scope in this case is from 3 to 5 years. Our action plan is designed to keep in mind all three target groups: 18 to 40-year-olds, merchants, and 40 plus year olds. We will adopt a push strategy for the 18 to 40-year-olds since they are early adopters. A pull strategy will be used for the 40 plus year olds, and a combination of both will be used for merchants since it is the trickiest part here. We also considered both the additional costs and revenues of our product strategy. Although working on existing products incur lower additional costs, it is already hard to monetize and much has to be spent into marketing in a competitive landscape. But if we introduce augmented products, on the other hand, we can leverage on our unique benefit of having a parent company like HSBC. More importantly, we won't have to change people's behavior since they are already used to paying for banking services. To summarize the whole context that we have put up here, what we want to establish is we want to capitalize on augmented services since this is not a commoditized market and we have the benefit of having HSBC by our side. We need to both increase merchants and customers and monetization, but with quick reflection of actions. Third, we need to target both customer groups and merchants. And fourthly, and finally, the additional benefits of newer augmented products have to outweigh the costs. Now that we have set the context, let us address how we are going to do this. Firstly, for acquisition of capturing the young generation, one simple feature we want to add to the service is sending money to those who do not have an account. The potential user can open an account in 3 days to receive the money, or it will go back to the sender. This way, we can get newer people to sign up. Simultaneously, we will focus on marketing targeted offers and discounts and the free P2P transactions, especially about the societal factor here. We will also highlight how PayMe helps in maintaining personal finance as well. For monetization of the capturing the young generation, we will introduce some augmented services like savings account, opportunity to invest in small amounts, getting small loans, paying all subscription fees from one platform. Dear judges, one very important factor to understand is the plan to implement all these augmented services is within a span of 3 to 5 years and is going to be a sequential one, not all together. We will introduce the augmented services with HSBC's help one by one after the proper market and beta testing. One interesting concept that we will want to use for the small loans is our algorithm will analyze both own transaction history as well as the families and friends transaction history to calculate scores for those who do not have credit scores. Here, the friends and family reputation will work as the collateral. Individuals will have to consent to being collateral in the first place. What these steps of the younger generation will do is they will motivate them for more transactions, ease the financial planning and lapses and tap on market gaps. But most importantly, they will consider the underlying factors of the young generation.
Step that Afton mentioned addresses and shows how we can increase the number of P2P users and incentivize them to the P2M services. But this requires extensive steps to onboard and mobilize merchants as well. To address this immensely important target group, we are going to use the huge number of existing user base to incentivize merchants to start using PayMe services. We plan to give 2 months of testing phase, which is free of commission, to the new merchants for them to first see the utility, and customers' demand of PayMe services. Upon registration, we will incentivize them through giving e-commerce and website payment gateway services that will bring all their transactions into one ecosystem. As soon as they start using PayMe and accept payments, we will incentivize them through milestones on the number of transactions occurring monthly and give rewards accordingly. In order to monetize these merchants, we will start charging commissions after 2 months and have reached a specific and after having reached a specific milestone of transactions with PayMe. We will charge the merchants for giving their customers the option to avail EMI services and hence increase their checkout rates and cart size. Another important feature we're going to provide is that we're going to provide loans to SMEs who are starting off or need a small loan for upgrading their business. And in this model, we are also going to use the data of the merchants' transactions to derive credit ratings for the SME merchants. These SMEs can avail the community as a collateral model to increase their credit rating and avail bigger loans if needed. These steps impact the merchants very positively, such as higher checkout rates, more customer satisfaction, and more cart size of the customers. These positive impacts outweigh the commissions that they will be paying for using PayMe services. Now that we have strategized the steps to tap into the young generation and merchants, it's time to look into what we have planned for the auxiliary target group of the people of more than 40 years of age. As we have mentioned before, there won't be direct push marketing to this TG, but rather various pull strategies to bring them to use PayMe. We believe that even though this target group is late to adopt new technologies, they are collectivistic in nature and their family has high influence. Capitalizing on this, we can run campaigns on Mother's Day, Father's Day, or even events where the children can send a specific amount of money to their parents through PayMe with a special message and have a chance to win special gifts or vouchers for their parents. These campaigns will enable the children to influence their parents to start using PayMe. And after that, we can show them options such as sending money with gift cards and options to give charity through PayMe. After acquiring this user base of this age, we will offer the subscription management service, which can take care of all the subscriptions and make it easier for them without the difficulty of remembering to make payments or being unaware of it. They will also be given targeted offers to tracking the transactional behavior of the customer. For example, giving discount vouchers on the payment for groceries at a mall that they usually go to. These are added services we will include to monetize the segment of the consumers. These steps ensure the target group is pulled towards PayMe through influence of the family and then retained through the ease of payments and using subscription packages. In order to further analyze the action plan, we have identified the risk associated with each of the steps and weighted them according to the risk and the probability of the occurrence. Here, the unwillingness to trust the value-added services by the young generation has the highest risk, but only has a moderate probability of occurring, whereas the late adoption of the services by the older TG has a higher probability. If we look at the timeline, we have set the steps throughout the span of 3 years, starting with beta testing and piloting of the new service in the first year and then rolling out the services from the second year. We will also look at indicators like the number of savings account created, the amount of loans taken, the number of merchants onboarded, and number of EMI transactions and other mentioned KPIs in order to track the performance of the steps in the action plan. To summarize, our action plan aims to hook the customers by the sense of community and then drive them forward to the newly introduced value-added services. These services have hardly been tapped by competitors to begin with, and PayMe can play its strength as the largest social P2P platform to financially include its target group. The solution not only tries to monetize more services and mobilize the target groups for more revenue generation, but also increases the customer stickiness by capitalizing on the sense of community among the consumers, which is at the core of the propositions of PayMe. That was all from our team. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Team Bangladesh, for your presentation. We're now going to move to the Q&A. Please put the timer at 15 minutes. Yes, thank you. Judges, please fire away.
All right, perhaps I'll ask the first question. Thank you, Bangladesh team, for presenting. In terms of the action plan, right, you mentioned about push strategy, push and pull, and pull strategy, but essentially it's basically a targeting, right? And it's already known in the case that these are the target that we're going for. So how would you then describe what's unique about your action plan or what's unique about your strategy?
Okay, ma'am, if I start on that note. Firstly, the things that we wanted to particularly focus on in our action plan that was quite like different or things that were not done exactly before was stuff such as adding those value added services. Some of them, like some of these services being the financial inclusion plan, where you get to invest through the PayMe app, something that will help onboard a lot of people, because this is a value added services that is not commonly found across our competitors, such as suppose Alipay or like WeChat Pay. Then we want to also add like services such as that subscription management system, which we could not further detail on due to like time constraints of the presentation. But if I may give you insights on that, what oftentimes happen is that a lot of the times nowadays there are many subscriptions that a person has to adhere to at the end of the month, be it digital subscriptions or be it other subscriptions. So we want to create an entire dashboard that organizes all of their subscriptions at one place, and at the end of the month they kind of notify you that all of these deadlines like for your payment or that is approaching, and just by the click of a single button you get to pay for all of the subscriptions at once if it is convenient. On top of that, another service we wanted to add it, like I gave you an example of things that might be more useful on the peer-to-peer market, but if I extend on the peer-to-merchant market, we feel like ideation such as the financial inclusion plan, which say that we would be giving SMEs loans and like ensure their credit worthiness by their transaction history, and like due to there being a phenomenon of SMEs requiring short-term bursts of like cash injections or money injections in general, we feel like these will be important strategies to onboard merchants to begin with. If that gives you some clarity, ma'am.
So why would consumers be willing to pay for subscription management, right? What's so different from paying a different subscription via a credit card? Why would they pay additional service just to use this?
Ma'am, basically the proposition that we want to propose here is the aggregation of it. So let's say you have 3 different bills to pay every single month, right? So you have to remember all those bills and then you have to pay those bills at different dates. So that's a little bit of a hassle here. So what we want to do is
there's such a feature called auto pay, so you don't have to remember dates. You just have to subscribe to auto pay. I think in different markets they have that kind of feature as well. So you basically don't have to remember it.
Yes, ma'am. So basically taking from that point specifically, so what we want to do in this process is we want to bring that, we want to market that feature of auto pay, and we want to add that feature to our monetization schemes, not exactly through charging, but to propose it as a value-added services to our whole process, so that people feel that we bring extra to the plate and we bring extra value to them through other financial products as
well. So auto pay is actually free by many other financial institutions, right? And under your monetization, you mentioned about subscription management. So you're saying that it's a value-added service, but you're not charging for it. So why is it under monetization?
So ma'am, the main objective here is to bring out more people to the whole process in the first place, so that people come to see what our value-added services are. So it's kind of the first introduction to the other factors of monetization first, and then they can see the features that we are introducing, like introducing savings account and getting small loans as well, so that they can capitalize on that, and we can monetize them from that point onwards.
Okay.
Yeah, I think overall you have suggested a lot of, initiatives like what you show here on the action plan, lending, invest, saving accounts, and many other like financial management tooling, etc. So what are the priority? Are you suggesting we all do this together, or there is a priority that we should focus on in the beginning?
Okay, so ma'am, we have actually suggested to introduce 4 or 5 plans here, right? So if we introduce all of the plans all together, people will get confused and we won't be able to focus on a specific product at a time. And also in terms of the finances, if we introduce all the features all at once, it will be very hard for us to reach break-even in the very first place. So what we want to do here is we want to go into a sequential order. The basis for this sequence will be the complexity of the service or how easy people adopt to these services. For example, The first service that we want to introduce is the savings account. It's a very simple process where you will join the savings account, and every month we will have a certain amount of money taken from your account, let's say 1000 HKT, and transfer it to the savings account. And after, let's say, 2 years, you can avail that the total money with interest. So it's a very simple process where there are only 2 or 3 steps. After we have done the savings account, and let's say the target of break even for reaching that savings account is about 8 months. So in the 6th month, we will start on the loans. And from that point onwards, we'll focus on the loan factor for another 6 to 8 months period. The objective is to reach break-even for every other product specifically and not altogether. And our objective in this, to introduce so many plans basically, is over a horizon of 3 to 5 years. So that is why we are addressing so many different factors here.
Okay, and how does it link to, your evaluations continue to use PayMe as a social, ecosystem, etc. So how does the action plan or the proposed suggestion related to the evaluation that you have done?
Yes, ma'am, if I may answer that. There were 2 exact parts of the action plan that focused on this social aspect as a whole. One of them was the fact that we would focus on major festivals and like introduce services during those festivals, because there's already a sense of community that harbors in like between the people of Hong Kong. But secondly, and this is what we feel was one of the most key aspects, was that the option to use your friends or your like close ones, your family, as a collateral for a loan you're seeking. And we feel like this is the plan that capitalizes on the sense of community, the most. If one of my teammates wants to extend on how this service would work.
So basically, in a traditional model, what happens? We look at your own transaction history, we look at some other factors, and we deduce a credit score from that, right? But for new users who do not have a credit history, it's very hard to do something like that. So in this place of community, so you are the people that you actually transact with the most as people with similar mindsets, with similar identity, with similar backgrounds. And so we believe that the community factor here actually chimes into this whole process and will add value to the whole process. So what we will do is, firstly, we will ask for consent. For example, I'm Afnan Farooq and my teammate here is Shadab Tatwar. So I'm asking for a loan, right? So what I'll do is I will go for this community as a collateral feature at the first place. So what the app will do is we'll ask Shadab Tatwar simply if he consents to become a collateral for me. So let's say Shadab Tatwar consents to become the collateral for me. And then what our machine learning algorithm will do is that will reduce the credit score by looking at Shadab Tatwar's history as well as mine if I have enough transaction history in the first place. And it's not just about Shadab Tatwar, there will be 2 or 3 more other friends or family people in this whole process as well. These people will chime in to basically bring it as bring the community factor as a collateral and give and giving loans easier in the first place.
If I may add a little bit to what my teammates have already addressed. So in Hong Kong, WeChat Pay is actually the 3rd most popular e-wallet, and they have positioned themselves also as a social platform, even though they are a payment service provider. So we want to introduce our services, social services, in such a way that leads us to having a competitive advantage, especially in the long run. We do not want to go head to head with WeChat Pay, since they already have a really large user base and a large backing as well. What we want to do, we have kind of discovered this amazing niche of where we bring together all our friends, family, and the users together as one. And we want to capitalize on this and build our value proposition on this, and thus establish a new type of social ecosystem. Thank you.
So to build on the topic of social ecosystem, right? So in your earlier analysis, you mentioned about alternative evaluation and that social ecosystem is a no-go. And then at the midst of your presentation, you mentioned about community. So hook on community and drive as services. So then I'd assume then social and community, there's a relationship for it. So somehow you say it's a no-go in the beginning, in the middle you say it's a go. So is your stance to leverage on social or not to leverage on social? And when you leverage on social, other than credit score, what other ideas do you guys have in leveraging the power community?
Thank you. Thank you for a question. For some clarity, we actually said that we want to become a type of social ecosystem in our alternative evaluation. If you look at the current slide I'm displaying right now, we saw that the pros outweigh the cons here, and basically because since we already have already capitalize on the social aspect, we can further use this to extend our value proposition. And if my other teammates can expand on what services we'll be providing.
Yes, ma'am. Apart from the collateral, like we've mentioned before, our social services will obviously include, like I've mentioned before, capitalizing services on different events and festivals such as Mother's Day, Father's Day, other cultural festivals associated with Hong Kong. But on top of that, some things we had in mind in terms of going ahead in future. Like we said, it's a 3 to 5 year plan. So we focused on 2-3 elements for each of the different themes. So for now, these are the 2 themes that we wanted to focus on the social aspect. But going forward, we also had plans to incorporate the entire technology surrounding a parent sending his or her child a pocket money through PayMe, and then sweet gestures associated with it, and the other services along these lines going into the future after the 3 to 5 year mark, after ensuring that we have properly implemented the steps we have already mentioned in the action plan to an extent.
Okay, we still have 2.5 minutes. Any further questions from our judges?
Okay, so on the risk side, can you elaborate a little bit more particular, on the risk when you talk about tapping into the social ecosystem of family and friends? What are the consideration that the bank should building on the lending proposition, writing, community as a collateral? What will be the risk for the bank to take?
So, ma'am, if I understood your question, what will be the risk for the bank in case it focuses on the community? Is that your question?
Yes, because now, for the credit score, you're writing on the community as a collateral. So what's the risk to the bank, and why you suggest we need to accept or take on the risk?
Okay, ma'am. So the first risk that can take place is, firstly, the friends and family might not be as synonymous as we are assuming it to be right now, right? So the way we are going to mitigate this risk is through the beta testing in the very first place, as we have mentioned already that in our timeline that the beta testing will be taking place for about a year. So that's a long period through which we will try to mitigate the risk as much as possible and try to link the dots between how the payment transactions of an individual with that person's friends and families. The second factor risk that can come in this place is the question of whether if I default on a loan, what happens then? Does my friends and family pay for me in that case? So this is a question that we have completely kept open to ourselves as well, because we believe that without enough market study, this is a question, or without enough factors considered in terms of the financial plan that we will have to make for these loans, we cannot properly answer these questions. So the way we are going to mitigate this risk is through the proper financial planning and market-based data as well. Otherwise, we won't be able to mitigate this risk. So these are the 2 primary risks that we have thought about up to now. One is before the giving out the loan, and one is after giving out the loan. So one.
Okay, thank you, Afnan, for your answer. This is the end of the Q&A. Time has run out. Thank you, students. Thank you, judges. Judges, I will see you in the next room. Students, please stay in this room for some testing with the technical team.